The orange glow against the midnight sky was the first thing Laura Jenkins saw when she woke to the sound of crackling timber, and by the time her bare feet hit the wooden floor, flames were already consuming the curtains her mother had sewn 20 years before. She grabbed nothing but the woolen shawl hanging by her bed and ran into the August night of 1878, her white nightgown billowing around her legs as the homestead her father had built with his own hands collapsed into itself like a dying star. The heat pushed her back 50 yards into the scrub brush where she fell to her knees in the dirt, watching everything she owned in this world turn to ash and ember while the desert wind carried sparks into the darkness above Agua Caliente, Arizona. She stayed there until dawn broke pale and merciless over the Sonoran landscape, revealing the complete devastation in sharp morning light. The house was gone. The barn had collapsed. The chicken coop was a skeleton of charred wood. Her milk cow lay dead in what remained of the pasture, overcome by smoke. The well still stood, its stone rim blackened but intact, the only structure that had survived. Laura walked through the ruins on trembling legs, her nightgown gray with ash, her long brown hair matted and smelling of smoke. She found nothing salvageable except for a cast iron skillet that had somehow survived in what used to be the kitchen, and her father's pocket watch. The glass face cracked, but the mechanism still ticking when she pulled it from the rubble where his bedroom had been. She sat on the stone edge of the well and looked at the watch in her palm. He had been dead 3 months, her father. A fever had taken him in May, and she had nursed him alone until his last breath because there was no one else. Her mother had died when Laura was 12. Her brother had gone east 5 years ago and never written. At 23 years old, she had been managing the homestead alone since her father's passing, growing vegetables and selling eggs in town, barely scraping by but surviving. Now she had nothing. No house, no livestock, except for the horse that had broken through the fence and run off. No food, no clothes except what she wore. No money, because the small amount she had saved was in a tin box that was now melted slag somewhere in the ruins. The sun climbed higher, and the heat became oppressive. Laura pulled her shawl over her head for protection and tried to think. She could walk into town. It was 7 miles. Someone might help her. But Agua Caliente was a hard town full of miners and cowboys and people struggling to survive themselves. She had no family, no close friends. Her father had been a solitary man who kept to himself, and she had inherited his reserved nature. The neighbors were few and far between in this harsh country, and the nearest homestead was 5 miles east. She was considering her options when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from the north. Laura stood up, suddenly aware of how she must look, filthy and wearing only a nightgown and shawl. She wrapped the fabric tighter around herself and waited as a rider emerged from the heat shimmer on the dusty road. He was tall in the saddle, wearing a brown hat and dark clothing, leading a pack horse behind him. As he got closer, she could see he was young, maybe near her own age, with dark hair that curled over his collar and a face that was sun-browned and serious. He reined in his horse 20 feet away, taking in the scene with sharp green eyes. His gaze moved from the destroyed homestead to Laura standing by the well, and she saw something shift in his expression that might have been concern or pity. She lifted her chin, refusing to appear as desperate as she felt. "Madam," he said, his voice low and rough. "What happened here?" "Fire," Laura said flatly. "Last night. It took everything." He dismounted in one smooth motion and walked closer, leading his horse. Now that he was on foot, she could see he was well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn leather vest over a dark shirt and carrying a revolver on his hip. He had the look of a working cowboy, someone who spent his life under the sun and sky. There was a gentleness in how he moved, though, that seemed at odds with his rough appearance. "You hurt?" he asked. "Sure no. I got out in time." He nodded and walked past her to look at the ruins, studying them with an intensity that suggested he was seeing more than just destruction. After a long moment, he turned back to her. You alone out here? Yes? Family? Dead or gone. He absorbed this information without visible reaction, then walked to his pack horse and began untying a canvas bundle. He brought it to her and held it out. There is a shirt and pants in here. They will be too big for you, but better than what you have got on. There is also a canteen of water. Drink slow. Laura hesitated, pride warring with necessity. Necessity won. She took the bundle. Thank you. There's a wash of rocks over there with some shade, he said, pointing to an outcropping about 30 yards away. You can change there. I will water my horses and wait. She walked to the rocks on unsteady legs, her bare feet burning on the hot ground. Behind the outcropping, she stripped off the ruined nightgown and shawl and dressed in the clothing he had given her. The shirt was soft flannel, faded blue, and hung to her knees. The pants were canvas work trousers that she had to roll up several times at the ankles and cinch tight with the belt that had been folded inside. She had no undergarments, no shoes, but at least she was covered. She drank from the canteen, forcing herself to take small sips even though she wanted to drain it dry, and then walked back to the well. The cowboy had removed his hat and was running his hand through his dark hair, looking at the remains of the barn. His horse and pack horse were drinking from a bucket he must have drawn up from the well. He turned when he heard her approach and gave a slight nod of approval at her appearance. I am Zachary Edwards, he said. Most people call me Zach. Laura Jenkins, this was my father's homestead. It is mine now, I suppose, for what that is worth. Do you know how the fire started? Laura shook her head. I woke up, and the house was already burning. It spread too fast to stop. Zach walked to the edge of the ruins and crouched down, examining something in the ash. He picked up a piece of charred wood and brought it close to his face, smelling it. His jaw tightened. This fire was set, he said quietly. The words hit Laura like a physical blow. What? Kerosene. You can still smell it in some of these timbers. Someone doused your house and lit it up. Laura felt her knees weaken and sat down hard on the ground. Zach was beside her in an instant, steadying her with a hand on her shoulder. Who would do that? She whispered. Why? You have any enemies? Anyone want this land? She tried to think through the shock. There is a man named Garrett Hayes. He owns most of the land around here. He offered to buy this homestead from my father last year. My father refused. Hayes came back after my father died and made me an offer. I refused too. But I cannot believe he would burn me out. He is on the town council. He is respected. Respected men have done worse for land, Zach said grimly. He stood up and looked around at the property, his expression calculating. How many acres you got here? 160. The well is good. The soil is decent if you work it right. My father chose this spot because of the water. Water is worth more than gold out here. Zach was quiet for a moment, then seemed to come to some decision. Miss Jenkins, I am going to speak plain with you. You cannot stay out here alone with nothing. You need shelter, food, supplies. You need help rebuilding if you want to keep this land. And if Hayes did this, he will be back to make another offer. And this time you will have even less ground to stand on when you refuse. I know all that, Laura said, her voice breaking despite her efforts to stay calm. But I do not know what to do about it. I have no money. I have nothing. Zach crouched down so he was at eye level with her. His green eyes were steady and serious. I will help you. Why would you do that? You do not know me. Because it is the right thing to do, and because I know what it is like to lose everything and have nowhere to turn. He paused, then continued. I have been working cattle drives for the past 6 years, saving every dollar. I have been looking for land to settle on, a place to start my own ranch. I passed through here on my way to look at a property north of here, but I do not like what I have heard about that area. Too many disputes over water rights. Your land here, though, this is good. If you would be willing to partner with me, I could provide the labor and materials to rebuild, and we could work the land together until you are back on your feet. Partner? Laura said slowly. What would that mean exactly? I would build a new house, a barn, get you some livestock. I would work the land, and we would share the proceeds from whatever we sell. I would take a percentage for my investment in labor. Once you have paid me back, the partnership dissolves and the land stays yours. I would move on to find my own place. It was too much to process. Laura looked at this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, offering her exactly what she needed. Every instinct told her to be suspicious, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw only honest intent. "Why do I feel like there is more to this story?" she asked. "Why would a cowboy with money saved be so eager to help a woman he just met?" Zach sat back on his heels and looked away across the desert. "My family had a farm in Texas. When I was 17, a drought hit, and we lost everything. My father tried to borrow money from a banker in town, but the terms were bad. When we could not pay, the bank took the farm. My father shot himself that winter. My mother died 6 months later from heartbreak, I think, more than anything else. My little sister went to live with an aunt who did not want her. I took to the cattle trails because I had nothing left and no one to go home to. I swore that if I ever had the chance to help someone keep their land, I would do it." The pain in his voice was raw and real. Laura felt something crack open inside her chest, some wall she had built to keep herself from needing anyone. "I am sorry," she said softly. "That is a terrible thing to carry." "We all carry something." Zach stood up and offered her his hand. "What do you say, Miss Jenkins? Will you let me help you?" Laura looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and strong, offering her a chance at survival. She thought about her father, about the years he had worked this land, about the promise she had made at his grave to keep it going. She thought about Garrett Hayes and his smug offers, about the injustice of being burned out and left with nothing. And she thought about this man, Zachary Edwards, who had stopped his journey to offer her help when he had no obligation to do so. She reached up and took his hand. His grip was firm and warm, and he pulled her to her feet with gentle strength. "All right," she said. "We have a partnership, but I want it understood that I will work just as hard as you. I'm not some delicate flower who needs to be protected. I can work." A small smile touched the corner of Zach's mouth, the first change in his serious expression. "I would not have offered if I thought otherwise. A homestead takes 2 people working full-time to make it successful. I will need your help as much as you need mine." They shook hands formally, sealing the agreement. Zach released her hand and turned to survey the property with a new purposefulness. "First thing we need is shelter," he said. "I have a canvas tent and enough supplies for a couple of weeks. We will set up a camp away from the ruins. Then I need to ride into Agua Caliente and get lumber and supplies ordered. Will you be all right here alone for a few hours?" "I have been alone for months. A few more hours will not kill me." He studied her face for a moment, and she had the strange sensation that he was seeing past her brave words to the fear underneath. But he did not call her on it, just nodded and went to his pack horse to retrieve the tent. They worked together to set up the camp on a flat area between the well and the road, far enough from the burned homestead that the smell of smoke was not as strong. The tent was large enough for 2 people, but Zach said he would sleep outside under the stars as he was used to it. He gave her a bedroll and a blanket, a tin plate and cup, and some hardtack and jerky from his supplies. Then he saddled his horse and prepared to ride out. "Keep the canteen full from the well," he said. "Stay in the shade as much as you can. If anyone comes by, be careful. Do not tell them about our agreement yet. Just say you are waiting for family to come help you." "You think Hayes will come?" "If he set that fire, he will come to make his offer. He will think he has won. Do not accept and do not refuse outright. Just say you need time to think. We do not want him to know you have other options until we are ready." Laura nodded, understanding the strategy, even if she did not like the idea of facing Hayes alone. Zach seemed to sense her unease because he paused before mounting up. "You have your father's revolver anywhere in that rubble?" "It was in the house. I do not know if it survived. When I get back, we will look for it. For now, stay alert." He swung into the saddle with easy grace. "I will be back before dark." Laura watched him ride away, his figure growing smaller against the vast landscape until he disappeared into the heat shimmer. Then she was alone with the ruins and the silence and the crushing weight of reality. She sat in the shade of the tent and let herself cry for the first time since waking to the flames. She cried for her father, for her lost home, for the life she had been trying so hard to maintain. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she washed her face with water from the well and forced herself to eat some of the hardtack even though it tasted like dust in her mouth. The day crawled by. The heat was brutal, shimmering off the ground in waves. Laura searched through the ruins carefully, looking for anything that might have survived. She found a few more items, a metal bucket, some nails, a fire poker, and miraculously her father's revolver. It was damaged. The wooden grip burned away and the barrel warped, but it was something. She also found some coins that had melted together, maybe $3 worth of silver, useless as currency, but still silver nonetheless. She was sitting by the well when she heard horses approaching from the west. 2 riders this time. Laura stood up, her heart beating faster, and recognized Garrett Hayes immediately. He was a thick man in his mid-40s, always dressed too well for the desert, with slicked back hair and a mustache he constantly touched. The man with him was younger, leaner, wearing a deputy's badge. Laura did not recognize him. Hayes dismounted and walked toward her with a show of concern on his face that did not reach his eyes. "Miss Jenkins, I just heard about the fire. What a terrible tragedy. Are you hurt?" "I am fine, Mr. Hayes. Thank God for that. I came as soon as I heard. This is Deputy Carson. I brought him along because I thought you might need official help." Hayes looked around at the destruction, shaking his head. "Looks like you lost everything. Such a shame. Do you have any idea how it started?" "No," Laura lied, watching his face carefully. "I woke up and it was already burning." These desert fires can start from anything. A spark, lightning, even the sun through a piece of glass. Very dangerous. Hayes turned back to her with what he probably thought was a sympathetic expression. "Miss Jenkins, I know this is a difficult time, but we need to talk about your situation. You cannot stay out here with no shelter, no supplies. It is not safe for a young woman alone. I am managing." "Are you?" Hayes gestured at her bare feet, at the oversized clothes she wore. "You have nothing, and I hate to be blunt, but you have no way to rebuild. The cost of lumber, labor, livestock, it would be thousands of dollars you do not have. I will find a way." Hayes sighed as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Miss Jenkins, Laura, please be reasonable. I am prepared to make you a very generous offer for this land. $500. That is more than fair given the current condition. You could take that money and start over somewhere else, maybe go back east where you would have an easier life." $500. It was an insult. The land alone was worth 3 times that, and with the well, even more. Laura felt anger rise in her throat, but forced herself to stay calm, remembering Zach's advice. "That is very generous, Mr. Hayes, but I need time to think about it. This is my father's land. I cannot make a decision like this so quickly." Hayes's expression hardened slightly. "Time is a luxury you do not have, my dear. Every day you stay out here alone, you are in danger. What if raiders come through? What if another fire starts? I would hate to see something happen to you." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Deputy Carson shifted his weight, his hand resting on his gun belt. Laura felt a chill despite the heat. "Nevertheless, I need time to consider my options, a few days at least." Hayes stared at her for a long moment, then seemed to force a smile. "Of course, I understand. Take a few days. But Laura, please think carefully. There are not many options for a woman in your position. My offer may be the best you will get." He mounted his horse and tipped his hat. "I will come back in 3 days. I hope you will make the right decision." They rode away, leaving Laura standing alone in the dust. She felt sick to her stomach, her hands shaking with delayed reaction. The deputy had never said a word, just stood there like an enforcer. Hayes had practically admitted to setting the fire with his talk of danger and things happening. And now she had 3 days before he came back, expecting her to give up everything. She was still standing there when Zach returned just before sunset, riding in with a loaded pack horse. He took one look at her face and dismounted quickly. What happened? Laura told him everything, the words tumbling out. Zach's expression grew darker as she talked, his jaw clenching. When she finished, he was quiet for a minute, thinking. 3 days, he said finally. That gives us time, but not much. I ordered lumber and supplies in town. They will be delivered tomorrow. We need to start building immediately, show him you are not going anywhere, and that you have help. Once we have a structure up, and you are clearly re-established, it will be harder for him to push you out. He had a deputy with him. What if he uses the law against me? Then we will deal with that when it comes, but right now we focus on building. Action is better than worry. Zach unpacked his horse, pulling out more food supplies, tools, 2 pairs of boots. He handed her the smaller pair. I guessed your size, try them on. The boots fit reasonably well, maybe a little big, but nothing that extra socks would not fix. Having something on her feet made Laura feel more human, more capable. Zach also gave her a bundle that turned out to be a simple cotton dress, undergarments, and a wide-brimmed hat. The woman at the general store helped me pick them out, he said, looking slightly embarrassed. I told her my sister had lost everything in a fire and needed basics. Laura felt tears prick her eyes again at his thoughtfulness. Thank you. You did not have to do all this. Partners help each other. That is how it works. He started building a fire as the sun sank below the horizon. We should eat and get some rest. Tomorrow we start building your new house. They sat by the fire as darkness fell over the desert, eating beans and bacon that Zach cooked in the cast iron skillet Laura had salvaged. The food was simple but hot and good, and Laura realized she was ravenously hungry. They did not talk much, both tired, but the silence was comfortable. Laura found herself studying Zach across the firelight, wondering about this man who had walked into her life at exactly the moment she needed help. He had an economy of movement, doing nothing wasted, everything purposeful. His face in repose was serious, almost sad. And she thought about the story he had told her about his family. He understood loss. That made him trustworthy in a way that words alone never could. Can I ask you something? Laura said eventually. Sure. Why were you out here alone? You said you were looking at land, but most cowboys travel with their crew. I left my last crew in Tucson 2 weeks ago. The trail boss wanted to drive into New Mexico, but I was done with driving cattle. I wanted to find my own place, so I took my pay and headed out alone. I have been alone for a long time, Miss Jenkins. I am used to it. You can call me Laura. If we are partners, we should use first names. He nodded. Laura. And you should call me Zach. All right, Zach. She liked the sound of his name, solid and simple. What will you do after you help me rebuild? Will you still look for your own land? That is a question for later. Right now I am here. He stood up and kicked dirt over the fire, banking it for the night. You should sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day. Laura crawled into the tent and lay down on the bedroll, her body aching with exhaustion. Through the canvas, she could hear Zach moving around outside, settling down for the night. She felt safer knowing he was there, standing watch in the darkness. It was a strange feeling relying on someone after so many months alone. But maybe, she thought as she drifted toward sleep, maybe it was all right to accept help. Maybe she did not have to carry everything by herself. The lumber wagon arrived mid-morning, driven by a grizzled teamster named Frank, who helped them unload the wood, nails, tar paper, and other supplies. He gave Laura a curious look but did not ask questions, just accepted his pay from Zach and drove off. By noon, Zach had marked out the foundation for a new house, smaller than the original but still substantial, with 2 rooms that could be expanded later. We will build the frame first, he explained, then get the roof on. That is the priority. Once you have a roof over your head and walls to keep out the weather, we can work on the rest. Should take us about a week if we work steady. Laura worked beside him, learning as she went. Zach was a patient teacher, showing her how to measure and cut, how to nail boards securely, how to check that everything was level and square. The work was hard, her muscles screaming by the end of the first day, but it felt good to be building something, fighting back against the destruction. They worked from dawn until dusk, breaking only to eat and drink water. Laura's hands blistered and bled, but she wrapped them in strips of cloth and kept going. On the second day, a man rode up while they were working on the frame. He was older, maybe 60, with a weathered face and kind eyes. Laura recognized him as Samuel Porter, who owned a homestead 6 miles to the south. "Heard about the fire," Samuel said, dismounting. "Came to see if you needed help." "We appreciate that, Mr. Porter," Laura said. "This is Zachary Edwards. He is helping me rebuild." Samuel nodded at Zach, sizing him up with the quick assessment of someone who had lived a long time and seen plenty of men. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he nodded approvingly. "Good. You need help. You come find me. My sons and I will lend a hand if you need it." "Thank you, sir," Zach said. "We are managing for now, but we will keep that in mind." Samuel turned to Laura. "I heard Garrett Hayes offered to buy you out." "He did. I refused." "Good. Do not trust that man. He has been buying up land around here for 2 years, and some of the deals have been suspicious. The Moreno family sold to him after their well went dry overnight. They swore someone had filled it with rocks. The Callahan place burned down 6 months ago, just like yours. They sold cheap and moved on." Samuel's expression was grim. "I cannot prove anything, but I have my suspicions." Laura and Zach exchanged a look. Zach's jaw was tight. "We will be careful," he said. After Samuel left, they worked in tense silence for a while. Finally, Laura said, "If Hayes is burning out homesteaders to get their land, someone needs to stop him." "First, we make sure you are safe and established," Zach said. "Then we can think about justice, but Laura, men like Hayes have money and influence. Taking them on is dangerous." "I know, but I am not going to let him win." Zach looked at her with something that might have been admiration. "No, I do not think you will." By the end of the 3rd day, the frame of the house was up, and they had started on the roof. Laura's entire body ached, but every time she looked at the structure taking shape, she felt a fierce pride. They were doing this. She was not beaten. That evening, as they sat by the fire eating dinner, Zach said, "Hayes will probably come tomorrow. He said 3 days. "I know." "What will you tell him?" "The truth. That I am rebuilding and I am not selling." "He will not like that." "I do not care what he likes." Laura met Zach's eyes across the fire. "I know this puts you in a bad position. If Hayes is as dangerous as Samuel thinks, helping me could bring you trouble. If you want to leave, I will understand." Zach was quiet for a moment, then said, "I am not leaving. We are partners. That means something to me." Laura felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. She realized she had been afraid he would leave, that she had started to rely on his steady presence more than she wanted to admit. "It means something to me too," she said softly. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Laura felt something shift between them. Some recognition that this partnership was becoming something more than a business arrangement. Then Zach looked away, clearing his throat. "We should get the tar paper on the roof tomorrow morning," he said. "That way if Hayes comes, he will see we are serious about staying." Garrett Hayes arrived at midday as predicted, this time with 3 men instead of just the deputy. Laura felt her stomach clench with fear, but forced herself to stand tall as they rode up. Zach was on the roof. Hammering down the last of the tar paper, he climbed down slowly and came to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence like a shield at her back. Hayes looked at the new house frame, his expression darkening. "Miss Jenkins, I see you have been busy." "I am rebuilding, Mr. Hayes. As you can see, I am not selling." "So it would appear." Hayes's gaze moved to Zach, cold and assessing. "And who might you be?" "Zachary Edwards, Miss Jenkins's partner." "Partner?" Hayes's eyes narrowed. "How convenient. A partner appears right after the fire. Tell me, Mr. Edwards, where exactly did you come from?" "That is my business," Zach said evenly. "Everything that happens on this land is my business. I own most of the territory around here. I look out for my neighbors." Hayes turned back to Laura. "Miss Jenkins, I am disappointed. I made you a very generous offer. You should have taken it." "I told you I needed to think about it. I have thought, and my answer is no. I see. Hayes looked at the house frame again, then back at them. You know, it is interesting. Fires out here can be very unpredictable. Things catch alight all the time. Lumber, tents, even people, if they are not careful. It would be a shame if all this hard work went up in smoke, too. Zach moved so fast Laura barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he was in front of Hayes's horse, his hand on the revolver at his hip, his voice low and deadly calm. Are you threatening us, Mr. Hayes? The three men with Hayes reached for their guns, but Hayes held up a hand to stop them. He stared down at Zach, and Laura saw something like fear flicker across his face before he masked it with anger. That sounded like a threat to me, Zach continued. In fact, it sounded like the kind of threat a man might make if he had been setting fires. Maybe the kind of fire that burned Miss Jenkins out in the first place. You are making serious accusations, Cowboy, and you are making serious threats. Here is how this is going to go, Hayes. You are going to turn around and ride away. You are not going to make any more offers on this land. You are not going to come back here. And if anything happens to Miss Jenkins, her property, or her livestock, everyone in Agua Caliente is going to know to look at you first. Do you understand me? Hayes's face was red with fury, but he could not seem to find words. The tension stretched tight as a wire for a long moment. Then Hayes yanked his horse's reins and turned away. You're making a big mistake, he said over his shoulder. Both of you. This land is not worth dying for. Everything is worth dying for if it is the right thing, Zach said, and now get out. They watched Hayes and his men ride away, tension radiating off Zach like heat. When they were finally out of sight, he exhaled slowly and turned to Laura. She was staring at him with wide eyes. That was incredibly stupid and incredibly brave, she said. That was necessary. Men like Hayes only understand strength. If we had backed down, he would have kept pushing until he got what he wanted. What if he comes back with more men? What if he tries to hurt you? Then we deal with it. But I do not think he will, not right away. We have put him on notice. He knows people will be watching now. Zach walked back to the house frame and picked up his hammer. Come on, we have a roof to finish. But Laura could not move. She stood there watching him. This man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to pray, he had stood up to Hayes without hesitation, had put himself between her and danger, had made himself a target to protect her, and suddenly she was not thinking about partnerships or homesteads or rebuilding. She was thinking about the way his hands were gentle when he showed her how to hammer a nail, the way his voice went soft when he talked about his sister, the way he had looked at her across the fire with something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Zach, she said. He turned, hammer in hand, and must have seen something in her face because his expression shifted. Laura? Thank you. For everything. For stopping. For helping. For standing up to Hayes. I do not know what I would have done if you had not come along. You would have survived. You are stronger than you think. Maybe. But I'm glad I did not have to find out. She walked to him, closing the distance between them. I just want you to know that I see you. I see what you are doing, and I am grateful. They stood there in the afternoon sun, close enough that Laura could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. Zach's expression was unreadable, but she thought she saw something tender in the way he looked at her. We should finish the roof, he said finally, his voice slightly rough. Laura nodded and stepped back, feeling the spell break. But something had changed between them. Some line had been crossed that could not be uncrossed. As they worked together for the rest of the afternoon, Laura found herself intensely aware of him. Of every time their hands brushed passing tools, every time he steadied her on the ladder, every time he smiled at something she said. She was falling for him, she realized, with a mix of terror and exhilaration. Falling for this quiet, serious cowboy who had saved her life without even knowing it. Over the next week, they finished the house. It was simple, but solid, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, and a smaller bedroom that Laura claimed. Zach built a covered porch and said he would sleep there until he built a separate bunkhouse. They worked on a new barn next, a smaller structure than the original, but enough to house a couple of horses and a milk cow when they could afford to buy them. Other neighbors began stopping by to help. Samuel Porter and his 2 sons came for 3 days and helped raise the barn. A Mexican family named Rodriguez, who owned a ranch to the east, brought food and offered to sell Laura a milk cow at a fair price when she had money. Even the local priest, Father Michael, rode out to bless the new house and bring news from town. "People are talking about what happened," he told them, "about the fire and Hayes's offers. There is growing concern about his land acquisitions. The county land office is starting to ask questions." "Good," Laura said. "Maybe that will slow him down." "Maybe, but be careful. Cornered animals are the most dangerous." After the house and barn were complete, they focused on preparing the land for planting. It was late in the season, but Zach said they could still get some vegetables in and have a fall harvest. They worked the soil together, planting squash, beans, and late corn. Laura used money that Zach loaned her from his savings to buy chickens and the milk cow from the Rodriguez family, and suddenly the homestead was starting to feel alive again. As August turned into September, the brutal heat began to ease slightly, and the rhythm of their days took on a comfortable pattern. They worked together during the day, ate meals together, sat by the fire in the evenings talking about their lives and dreams. Laura learned that Zach had always wanted to breed horses, that he could play harmonica, that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. Zach learned that Laura could read and write, unusual for a woman of her background, that she had a talent for drawing, that she missed her father with an ache that never fully went away. They did not talk about what was growing between them, but it was there in every shared glance, every accidental touch, every comfortable silence. Laura would catch herself watching him work, admiring the strength in his shoulders, the capable way his hands handled tools or gentled the horses. She would find reasons to stand close to him, to brush against him, and she could feel his awareness of her like electricity in the air. One evening in late September, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. They had been working particularly hard that day, repairing fence line, and were both tired and quiet. Laura was mending a shirt by lamplight while Zach cleaned his revolver, a task he did regularly. "Can I ask you something personal?" Laura said suddenly. "All right. Have you ever been in love?" Zach's hand stilled on the gun. He was quiet for so long that Laura thought he would not answer. Then he said, "Once, a long time ago. A girl in Texas before we lost the farm. Her name was Emma. But when we lost everything, her father would not let her see me anymore. She married a banker's son 6 months later. I am sorry." "Do not be. Looking back, I am not sure it was love. I think I just needed something to hold on to when everything else was falling apart." He looked at her, his expression serious. "What about you?" "No, my father kept me close. He did not trust men, I think. He was very protective. I never really had the chance to meet anyone." Laura set down her mending. "To be honest, I never thought much about love or marriage. I was too busy just trying to survive." "And now?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Laura met his eyes and decided to be brave. "Now I think about it more. Now I wonder what it would be like to not be alone, to have someone who stays." Zach set the gun aside and stood up, walking to the edge of the porch. His back was to her, his shoulders tense. "Laura, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to beat faster. "What?" "I am not a good man to depend on for staying. My whole life I have been moving, 6 years on cattle drives, never in one place more than a few months. I do not know if I know how to stop moving, and I do not want to promise you something I cannot deliver." Laura stood up and walked to him, placing her hand on his shoulder. He turned to face her, and she saw conflict in his eyes. "I am not asking you for promises," she said. "I am just saying that I value what we have built here. Not just the house and the barn, but this, us. The way we work together, the way we talk, the way I feel safe when you're around." She took a breath. "I am saying that I care about you, Zach, More than I probably should, given that we have only known each other a couple of months, but I do. Zach's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with exquisite gentleness. I care about you too, more than I've cared about anyone in a long time. And that scares me, Laura, because everyone I have ever cared about, I have lost. You have not lost me. I am right here. For now. But what about when winter comes and I need to find work? What about when Hayes decides to make another move? What about all the things that could go wrong? Then we face them together. That is what partners do, remember? Zach smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we are the ones making it complicated. Laura stepped closer, closing the distance between them until they were nearly touching. All I know is that when I look at you, I do not see someone who is going to leave. I see someone who stayed when he could have ridden on, someone who fought for me, someone who makes me feel like I am not alone anymore. Zach's other hand came up to frame her face, and he leaned his forehead against hers, breathing her in. Laura, he whispered, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. Kiss me, she said. He did. His lips met hers with a gentleness that made her heart ache, a tenderness that spoke of restraint and carefully controlled desire. Laura melted into him, her hand sliding up to grip his shoulders as the kiss deepened. It was everything she had imagined and more, sweet and searching, a conversation without words. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I have wanted to do that for weeks, Zach admitted, his voice rough. So have I. He kissed her again, less gentle this time, more passionate. Laura responded with equal fervor, feeling alive in a way she had never experienced. This was what people wrote poems about, what made them do foolish things, what made life worth living. This connection, this fire, this rightness. When they finally pulled apart again, Zach rested his forehead against hers. We should talk about what this means, he said, or we could just let it be what it is and see where it goes. Is that your answer to everything? Just do it and see what happens? It seems to be working so far. Laura smiled up at him, feeling joy bubble up inside her. Besides, talking too much spoils the moment. Zach laughed, a real laugh, and the sound made Laura's heart soar. She had not heard him laugh often, and each time was precious. He pulled her into an embrace, tucking her head under his chin, and they stood there on the porch as the last light faded from the sky. You are dangerous, Laura Jenkins, he murmured into her hair. Why? Because you make me want to stay. Laura closed her eyes and held him tighter, hoping with everything in her that he would. The next few weeks were the happiest of Laura's life. They continued working the homestead, but now there was a new dimension to their partnership. Stolen kisses when they passed each other in the barn, holding hands as they walked the fence line, sitting close together by the fire, Zach's arm around her shoulders, Laura's head on his chest. They did not make love, not yet. Both seemed to understand that they were building something too important to rush, that physical intimacy would come when the emotional foundation was secure. They talked about the future, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Zach admitted that he was starting to think about staying permanently, about making this homestead his home. Laura said she would want him as a full partner, not just someone working off a debt. They talked about expanding the herd, maybe getting some horses like Zach wanted, building a real ranch over time. They talked about everything except marriage, that subject still too weighty to approach directly. In late October, Zach rode into Agua Caliente to sell some of Laura's eggs and vegetables and get supplies. He was gone for most of the day, and Laura found herself missing him with an intensity that surprised her. She had gotten so used to his presence that his absence felt like a missing limb. When she saw him riding back in the late afternoon, her heart lifted, but Zach's face was serious as he dismounted. Laura knew immediately that something was wrong. What is it? She asked. There was trouble in town. A man was asking questions about you, about me, about our arrangement. He was not subtle about it. One of Hayes's men? I do not think so. This man was different. He said he was from the county land office, investigating some irregularities in property transfers. He wanted to know if Hayes had approached you after the fire, if you felt pressured to sell. I told him yes to both. Laura felt a chill. So it is true? Hayes is under investigation? Looks like it. And if that's the case, we need to be careful. If Hayes thinks you talked to investigators, he might decide you are a bigger threat than he can tolerate. What should we do? For now, stay alert. I picked up some extra ammunition in town, and I'm going to start keeping watch at night. I do not think Hayes will try anything overt, but desperation makes men do stupid things. That night, Laura lay in her bed unable to sleep, listening to the sound of Zach moving around outside. She wanted him close, wanted the comfort of his presence, but did not want to distract him from keeping watch. Finally, around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went outside. Zach was sitting on the porch steps, his rifle across his knees, staring out at the dark landscape. He turned when he heard her approach. "Cannot sleep?" he asked. "No. Can I sit with you?" "Of course." She settled beside him on the step, and he put his arm around her, pulling her close against the chill of the October night. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead. "I have been thinking," Laura said eventually, "about what Father Michael said, about cornered animals being dangerous. If Hayes is under investigation, he might do something rash, and I do not want you caught in the crossfire. I am already in the crossfire. I have been since the day I decided to help you. But you could leave. You could go north like you planned, find your own land, start over somewhere safe." Zach was quiet for a moment, then said, "Is that what you want?" "No, but I want you to know that I would understand if you did. I do not want you to stay out of obligation. I want you to stay because you want to." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the starlight. "Laura, I am not going anywhere. Not because of obligation, not because we are partners, but because I love you. I did not plan on it. I did not want it, but there it is. I love you, and I am staying." Laura felt tears spring to her eyes. "You love me?" "Yes. I should have said it sooner. But I am not good with words. I am better with actions, but you deserve to hear the words, so here they are. I love you, Laura Jenkins. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love how you work without complaining and how you face down men twice your size without flinching. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you exactly how much." Laura was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. "I love you too. I have for weeks, but I was afraid to say it, afraid you would think I was trying to trap you or that I was confusing gratitude with love. But it is not gratitude, Zach. It is love. Real, honest, terrifying love." He kissed her then, deep and fierce, and Laura kissed him back with all the emotion swelling in her chest. When they broke apart, both were trembling. "Marry me," Zach said, the words tumbling out. "Not because we should or because it makes sense, but because I do not want to spend another day without you being mine completely. Marry me, Laura." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They held each other on the porch steps, laughing and crying at the same time, giddy with joy and relief. They had found each other against all odds, had built something real and lasting from ashes and loss. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They were married a week later by Father Michael in a simple ceremony at the Homestead. Samuel Porter and his family came, along with the Rodriguez family and several other neighbors. It was a small gathering, but warm and genuine. Laura wore a simple blue dress that Zach had bought for her in town, and Zach wore his best shirt and pants. They exchanged vows under the open sky with the homestead they had built together as witness, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their days. That night, they came together as husband and wife with a passion that had been building for months. Zach was gentle and patient, making sure Laura was comfortable and ready. She gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back, and the intimacy between them was profound. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, talking softly and making plans for their future. "I want children," Laura said, tracing patterns on Zach's chest. "I know we have not talked about it, but I do. I want a family." "So do I," Zach said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I want a house full of children, noise and laughter and chaos. I want everything I lost when I was 17, but this time I will build it right. This time it will last." "We will build it together," Laura corrected. "That is the difference." They made love again as the moon rose high in the sky, sealing their vows with their bodies and their hearts. The investigation into Garrett Hayes moved slowly, as legal matters often did. But over the winter months, more information came to light. 2 other families came forward with stories of suspicious fires and pressure to sell. A former employee of Hayes testified that he had been ordered to sabotage wells and fences on properties Hayes wanted. The evidence mounted, and by the time spring arrived in 1879, Hayes was facing serious charges of arson, extortion, and fraud. Laura and Zach followed the case through Father Michael and Samuel Porter, who attended the court hearings in Tucson. They did not go themselves, choosing instead to focus on building their life together. The homestead was thriving. They had expanded the garden, bought 2 more cows and a bull, and started a small herd. Zach built a proper bunkhouse, and then expanded the main house, adding a 2nd bedroom for future children. In April, Laura discovered she was pregnant. She told Zach one evening at dinner, simply and directly. He stared at her for a moment in shock, then swept her into his arms, spinning her around and laughing with pure joy. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a family." "Yes," Laura said, laughing through happy tears. "We are." Zach was attentive throughout her pregnancy, almost to the point of being overprotective. He did not want her lifting anything heavy or working too hard. Laura humored him to a point, but refused to be treated like an invalid. They compromised, with Laura doing lighter tasks and Zach hiring a young man from town to help with the heavier ranch work. In July, Garrett Hayes was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 10 years in territorial prison. His land holdings were liquidated and sold off to pay restitution to his victims. Laura and Zach received some compensation for the fire, though no amount of money could make up for what she had lost. Still, it felt like justice, like the world had been set right in some small way. In early December, Laura went into labor. Zach rode like mad to fetch the midwife from town, a capable woman named Mrs. Brennan, who had delivered half the children in the territory. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Zach, pacing outside the bedroom, thought he might lose his mind with worry. But finally, just after dawn, he heard the strong cry of an infant, and Mrs. Brennan called him inside. Laura was exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft cloth. "Meet your son," she said softly. Zach approached the bed with trembling hands and looked down at his child for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was screaming lustily, his little face red with outrage at being born. Zach felt something break open inside his chest, a feeling so overwhelming it brought tears to his eyes. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect, both of you." They named him Daniel, after Laura's father. He was a healthy, strong baby with a good appetite and strong lungs. Zach was besotted from the moment he held his son, spending hours just watching him sleep or trying to coax smiles from him. Laura would often find them together in the rocking chair Zach had made, the big cowboy cradling the tiny infant with infinite gentleness, singing soft songs or telling him stories about the ranch they would build together. Life settled into a new rhythm with a baby in the house. There was less sleep and more work, but also more laughter and more love. Laura marveled at how Zach had blossomed into fatherhood, how naturally protective and nurturing he was. The man who had been alone for so long now had a family, and he cherished every moment of it. As Daniel grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to expand. Zach bought more cattle and began breeding horses as he had always dreamed. Laura managed the household and garden, sold eggs and produce in town, and kept the ranch accounts. They hired seasonal help during roundups and built a reputation for honest dealing and hard work. The homestead that had burned to ash was now a thriving ranch, and people began calling it the Edwards Ranch, a name that filled both Laura and Zach with pride. When Daniel was 3, Laura became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the summer of 1883 she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. She had her mother's brown hair and her father's green eyes, and from the moment she entered the world she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "You are in so much trouble," Laura told Zach, watching him cradle their newborn daughter with an expression of pure adoration. "Why?" "Because you are going to spoil her rotten." "That is my right as her father," Zach said seriously, but his eyes were twinkling. "Besides, she deserves to be spoiled after all the work of being born." Daniel was fascinated by his baby sister, insisting on helping with everything. He would bring her toys, sing to her, and report to his parents every time she opened her eyes or made a sound. Watching her son and daughter together filled Laura with profound contentment. This was what she had dreamed of during those dark months after the fire, though she had hardly dared to hope it could be real. A family, a home, a man who loved her completely. 2 years later, they had another son, whom they named Matthew. He was a calm baby, easygoing and happy, the opposite of Daniel, who had been intense and demanding from birth. With 3 children, the house was full of noise and activity. Zach built an addition onto the house, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The ranch now employed 3 full-time hands and several seasonal workers. They had over 200 head of cattle and were becoming known for their horse breeding program, selling trained horses to ranchers and the army. On a warm evening in the spring of 1886, Laura and Zach sat on the porch watching the sunset, much as they had done 8 years before when they first kissed. The children were playing in the yard under the watchful eye of Maria, a young Mexican woman who helped Laura with the household. Daniel, now 7, was teaching 5-year-old Rose to rope a fence post, while 3-year-old Matthew toddled around collecting rocks. "Do you ever think about that night?" Laura asked, leaning against Zach's shoulder. "What night?" "The night the homestead burned, when I lost everything." Zach was quiet for a moment, then said, "Sometimes, but I do not think of it as the night you lost everything. I think of it as the night we found each other." Laura smiled. "That is a much better way to look at it. It is the truth. If that fire had not happened, I would have ridden past your homestead and never stopped. I would have gone north, bought land somewhere, lived alone. I would have survived, but I would not have lived. Not really. You taught me how to live, Laura, you and the children. You taught me too. You taught me that it is all right to need someone, to rely on someone. You taught me that love is not a weakness, but a strength." Zach pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her hair. "We taught each other. That is what makes us work." Daniel came running up to the porch, rope in hand, Rose trailing behind him. "Papa, I showed Rose how to throw the rope, but she says girls do not need to know how to rope." "Girls need to know everything boys know," Zach said firmly. "On a ranch, everyone works, no matter if you wear pants or a dress." "See?" Daniel said triumphantly to his sister. "I told you." Rose stuck her tongue out at her brother, but picked up the rope again with determination. Laura and Zach laughed, watching their children go back to their play. "Think we will have any more?" Zach asked. "Maybe. I'm not opposed to it. Though 3 children keeps me plenty busy. 3 is a good number, but 4 would not be bad either, or 5. Laura laughed and swatted his arm. "Easy for you to say. You do not have to carry them." "True, but I would if I could. I would do anything for you, Laura. You know that." "I do, and I would do anything for you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue, the stars beginning to emerge. Matthew abandoned his rock collection and climbed up onto Zach's lap, sucking his thumb and yawning. Zach held him gently, stroking his soft hair, and Laura felt her heart swell with love for this man who had appeared in her life when she needed him most. "I have been thinking about something," Zach said after a while. "What?" "I want to expand the ranch more. Maybe buy the Porter land when Samuel retires. He has been talking about moving to California to be near his daughter. His sons do not want to ranch. If we could get his land, we would have almost 1,000 acres total. We could run a serious operation. Can we afford it?" "I think so. We have been saving steadily. The horse breeding is bringing in good money. And I've been talking to a banker in Tucson about a loan. Not the kind of loan that destroyed my father, but a reasonable one with fair terms that we could pay back over time." Laura considered this. "It is a big step. Are you sure you want to take that risk?" "I am sure." "This ranch is our legacy, Laura. It is what we leave for our children and their children. I want to build something that lasts, something that cannot be taken away." "Then let's do it, but carefully. I do not want us to overextend ourselves." "Agreed. We will be smart about it." Over the next 2 years, they negotiated with Samuel Porter and eventually bought his land, merging the two properties into one large ranch. It was a risk, taking on debt and more responsibility, but it paid off. The larger operation allowed them to be more efficient and profitable. They built a new barn and expanded the horse breeding program. Zach hired a foreman, a reliable man named Tom who had worked for them as a seasonal hand and proved himself trustworthy and capable. In 1888, Laura became pregnant again. She was 33 now, and the pregnancy was harder than the previous ones. She was tired all the time, and the baby sat heavy. But when she gave birth in the spring of 1889, it was to healthy twin girls. They named them Sarah and Emma, and Zach joked that they had reached their limit on children now. "5 is plenty," he said, though his eyes were soft as he looked at his twin daughters. "More than plenty. We are blessed." "We are," Laura agreed, exhausted but happy. The ranch continued to prosper. Daniel grew into a serious, hard-working boy who loved the land as much as his father did. Rose was spirited and independent, insisting on learning to ride and rope and do everything her brother did. Matthew was gentle and thoughtful, showing an early aptitude for handling animals. The twins were still babies, but already showing distinct personalities. Sarah quiet and observant, Emma loud and demanding. On their 10th wedding anniversary in November 1889, Zach took Laura into Tucson for 3 days, leaving the children with Maria and Tom. It was the first time they had been alone together in years, and they savored every moment. They stayed in a hotel, ate in restaurants, walked the streets hand in hand like young lovers. On the last night over dinner, Zach gave Laura a necklace, a simple silver chain with a small turquoise stone. "It is beautiful," Laura said, touching the stone with gentle fingers. "The stone is from your land, the homestead where we met. I found it when we were clearing the ruins. I had it polished and set in silver. I wanted you to have something that represents where we started." Laura felt tears prick her eyes. Even after 10 years, he could still surprise her with his thoughtfulness. "I love it, and I love you, more than I can ever say." "You do not have to say it. I see it every day in how you live, how you love our children, how you work beside me to build this life. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Laura. I thank God every day that your homestead burned, as terrible as that sounds, because it brought you to me." "It brought us to each other," Laura corrected. "That is how I choose to see it. Not as loss, but as transformation. We both lost everything at different times in different ways, but we found each other and built something better than what we lost." They clinked glasses, toasting their past and their future, and later that night they made love with the same passion as their wedding night, reaffirming their commitment to each other. The years continued to pass in the comfortable rhythm of ranch life. The children grew and thrived. Daniel proved to be a natural rancher, taking on more responsibility as he got older. At 15, he was already handling cattle drives and horse trading, showing the same serious dedication as his father. Rose remained independent and spirited, scandalizing some of the neighbors by wearing pants and working alongside the men, but Laura and Zach encouraged her to be herself. Matthew found his calling working with horses, able to gentle even the most stubborn animals with patience and kindness. The twins grew into mirror images of each other in appearance, but opposites in temperament. Sarah studious and quiet, Emma vivacious and social. In 1895, when Daniel was 18, he announced that he wanted to go to agricultural college in California for a year to learn about new ranching techniques and animal husbandry. It was the first time one of their children would leave the ranch for an extended period, and Laura cried the day they put him on the train, but she was also proud. They had raised a son who valued education and wanted to improve himself in the ranch. "He will come back," Zach assured her, holding her as they watched the train pull away. "This is his home. This is his legacy. He just wants to be better prepared to take care of it." "I know, but he is still my baby." Zach smiled. "He will always be your baby. All of them will. That does not change." Daniel did come back a year later, full of ideas and enthusiasm. He implemented new breeding techniques and introduced better record-keeping systems. The ranch continued to grow under his fresh perspective combined with Zach's experience. Father and son worked together seamlessly, and Laura could see Zach's pride every time he looked at Daniel. Rose surprised everyone by falling in love with a young teacher who came to Agua Caliente to start a school. His name was William Carter, and he was educated, kind, and completely smitten with Rose. Zach initially struggled with the idea of his daughter getting married, but William won him over by showing respect for Rose's independence and by genuinely loving her for who she was, not who he wanted her to be. They were married in the spring of 1897, and William moved to the ranch, teaching at the local school, but also helping with the ranch work in his spare time. Matthew, at 16, was already being consulted by neighboring ranchers about problem horses. He had his father's gentle nature and his mother's patience, a combination that made him exceptional at his chosen work. The twins were 13, Sarah planning to go to college to become a teacher like Rose's husband, Emma declaring she would stay on the ranch forever and help run it with Daniel. On a cool evening in October 1898, exactly 20 years after the fire that had destroyed Laura's first homestead, she and Zach stood in the same spot where that house had once stood. They had left the ruins alone all these years, letting the desert reclaim them, but the stone well still stood, a marker of where it all began. 20 years, Laura said softly. "Can you believe it? Some days it feels like yesterday, other days it feels like a lifetime." Zach put his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Do you have any regrets?" "Not a single one. Every choice led me here, to you, to our children, to this life. What about you?" "My only regret is all the years I wasted before I met you. But I cannot even really regret that because those years made me who I am. They taught me to value what we have built." Laura leaned into him, comfortable in his embrace. Her hair had streaks of gray now, and there were lines around her eyes and mouth. Zach's dark hair was threaded with silver, and his face was weathered from decades under the sun. But when she looked at him, she still saw the serious young cowboy who had stopped to help a desperate woman, who had offered partnership when she had nothing, who had stayed when he could have left. "I love you, Zachary Edwards," she said. 20 years later, and I love you more than I did on our wedding day." "I love you too, Laura Edwards. And I will love you for 20 more years and 20 after that and every year until my last breath." They kissed in the fading light. Two people who had found each other in the ashes and built something beautiful and lasting. Behind them, the Edwards Ranch stretched across the desert, a testament to love, hard work, and the courage to begin again. Their children would carry on what they had built, and their children's children after them. The homestead had burned and Laura had lost everything, but in that loss she had found something infinitely more valuable. She had found love. She had found home. She had found her place in the world. And that, Laura thought as Zach held her close, was worth every moment of hardship that had brought her to this point. They had built a new beginning together, and it was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined on that terrible night when flames consumed her old life. From the ashes, they had created something eternal: love, family, and a legacy that would endure for generations. As the sun set on the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Laura and Zach walked hand in hand back to their home, ready to spend the rest of their days together in the paradise they had built from nothing but hope, determination, and the transformative power of love.